this is probably one of the most dramatic Gospels of Pentecost. And I want you to know that I'm all fired up because I just got back from our diocese convention. I was a little concerned about the sermon for today, being so busy. And then we had a service on Saturday, and they had the same readings. So I just stole Reverend Ann's sermon, and here it is. The Lord provides, huh? Today we recognize All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day honors those declared the saints of the church, canonized by the church. You know, the big guys, the important ones, so holy and religious that they went straight to heaven. They passed go and they collected $200 too. People like St. Peter and Francis of Assisi, Teresa of Calcutta, and Anthony and Joseph, and of course the 9th century Dutch priest St. Frederick. St. Frederick of the Green Shoes, who, as it was written, was trained in piety and sacred learning. In the Bible, Paul calls all believers saints. You and me were saints. And in the spirit of Groucho Marx, I question any organization whose standards are so low that they would call me a saint. But it's true. It's not about how great you are, how good you are, how holy or righteous you are, or how much you have your life together. A saint is basically someone who loves God and God's people. And that's us. We are saints. It's real. It's like Jesus, not the Hollywood Jesus, not the sanitized Jesus with the lily soft hands who walked 6 feet above the air and went around speaking in King James English and was Norwegian. Not that Jesus. I don't need that Jesus, one bishop said the other day. I want the real Jesus with dirty toenails. That's what he said. I liked that image. We need a Jesus, a real Jesus, to speak to real people in real situations, because we all need to meet God where we are. The one who loves us enough to search us out even as we stumble around thinking, we're in control, trying hard to have faith, trying to do this thing we call life. Saints, we're saints that are coarse and rough around the edges, but like holy Velcro, we connect with other coarse and rough-edged people. And I'll tell you, it's the rough edges that gives God something to hold on to. That's church, and that's a saint. It is All-Hallow-Tide, a triduum, which in addition to being a good Scrabble word when you're stuck with 2 U's, a triduum means a 3-day observance of the communion of saints. We have All Saints' Day, which is November 1st. We have the Vigil, which was Halloween, October 31st, and All Souls' Day, which is November 2nd. All Souls' Day is a time when folks would stream to the graveyards in the medieval and Reformation days. They'd have flowers and they'd have lanterns, and they prayed for their departed. And then they had parties, kind of like tailgate parties, right in the cemetery, with spiced cider, and they had baked special breads, and they played music. Elizabethan composers like John Dowland, his greatest hits. And they made cakes, lots of cakes, sometimes called soul cakes. And they'd leave it back at their homes in cozy, warm rooms with a blazing fire for the departed spirits, their loved ones, to come in and dine and warm their feet. And it would be a room without mirrors, because if the spirit might get trapped in a mirror and could not move on. So that's why sometimes you see mirrors that are covered. Today, All Saints is recognized in most of the mainline denominations, and it's an important time, especially if you have suffered the loss of someone, or you wonder about what's on the other side behind the stars. It's a time of year when we remember those who have died, as we acknowledge the one who said, I am the resurrection and the life. I think I have shared I'm sure I've shared this story with you, probably more than once, but I'm going to share it again. When I was at a clergy meeting, several years ago, and we sat in this kind of like this horseshoe shape, and the facilitator, the dean, asked, what's going on in your parishes? And we all went around with a bunch of different answers. Oh, we're having a fundraiser. Oh, we're having a special book study, or we're having bingo night on Thursday, or we just painted our front door red. And then they came to me with the question, what's going on in your church? And I said, I see angels. And they all looked at me like I was kind of weird or something, like, you're looking at me now. But it's true. During the service, through the eyes of my imagination, I see angels. They come right through the ceilings and through the walls of our sanctuary when we have our Eucharistic moment. The heavenly host, right out of an early Italian Renaissance painting. Winged creatures, and they're moving, and they're floating, and they're garbed, and all this flowing, colorful material, tons and tons of material. They're here to join us for communion. We're all connected. Angels and ghosts and saints and all souls, big and small, children, men, women, all God's people. I think I even saw a dog once. I even saw a dog once. Every Sunday as we worship God, I believe our loved ones beyond are doing the same thing. They're joining us. In our communion prayer today, we will hear, in the multitude of your saints, you have surrounded us with a great cloud of witnesses. Therefore, we praise you, joining our voices with angels and archangels and with all the company of heaven. And then we will sing the Sanctus, the song of angels. They are here today. Imagination is an important ingredient in faith. It's not that you make things up, but rather you hear what Jesus is saying, and then you believe that it's true, and then you imagine what it would be like. Like in our gospel, when Jesus stood in front of a tomb, and he yelled it out, telling us that life goes on, that we do not cease to be. For I am the resurrection and the life, he said. And when life touches God, it becomes immortal. And just to prove it, I'll call Lazarus back from the side of death to tell you himself. Let Lazarus show you himself. The Bible teaches that the me within this body, the me who looks out the windows of my eyes, will survive death. The me who listens to Cat Stevens, who watches old sci-fi movies with my son, who shares his ice cream with his dog and tells sophomoric jokes, like the time the minister had the kids forward, and he described to the kids how great and wonderful heaven is. And then he asked, who wants to go to heaven? And everyone raised their hand except one timid boy. What's the matter, son? Don't you want to go to heaven? The minister asked. The boy answered, yeah, but I thought you were getting a load up to go right now. The me in this physical, earthly stage of life will go on to new beginnings, to the hereafter, where my body, though my body lay in the grave at death, the eternal I, my soul, will be in paradise, in Hades, in Club Med, or whatever, heaven, whatever you want to call it. As Winston Churchill said so well, when the bugle plays taps at my funeral, they'll be playing reveille for me in heaven. All Saints' Day reminds us that we're one big family, past and present and even future. We are all within God's space, enormous space, and we have this mysterious spiritual communion we all share in with all souls, moms and dads and sons and daughters and siblings, all of our loved ones. Do they know of our life on earth? Do they know of our joys and our struggles and our loneliness that we have down here? Can there be love and care and sympathy and prayer between us? The church says yes, and especially today, on All Saints' Day. So you're not crazy if you talk to your deceased loved ones. If you see something that reminds you of mom or dad, or you sense their closeness like a thin place, like a shroud or the veil between heaven and earth, when it gets so thin, you can feel it and sense it. Death hides, but it does not divide. Thou art but on Christ's other side. Thou art with Christ, and Christ is with me. In him I still am close to thee. I'll end with a story that I remember hearing about a young woman who was sad because her dad was terminally ill. And how she would talk to him about it and say how she's sad because he would miss so much of her life. And like, someday when I get married, you won't be able to make it to the wedding. And we won't be able to have that father-daughter dance that most people do. So Dad grabbed the CD player and his portable oxygen tank, and they went out to the deck, and they faced the lake, and he said he wanted her to dance with him the song that she would pick for her wedding reception. She popped in a CD and embraced her dad, and they danced. And oh, how she cherished that moment, she said, and that memory. And what really got me to thinking was, afterwards she said, her dad said, "Here, I want to give something to you." And he reached in his pocket and he gave her a little stone, a little gray stone, a Petoskey stone. They must have lived in Michigan. And Dad said, "I want you to toss this stone into the water." So she gave it a toss and she threw it in the water from the deck. And then Dad said, "I want you to remember something. I will never be any farther away from you than that. Ever." Well, she did marry, and her dad did die before the wedding. And the thing is, when she would come home to see her mom or visit her old house in her old bedroom, for example, in the next few years or so, she would frequently find these little Petoskey stones, these little gray stones, stuck in dresser drawers or in tea containers in the kitchen or in the armrest of the lazy boy. Stones her father hid to remind her of his promise. And I thought, what are the little gray stones in our lives that remind us of our departed loved ones? Reminders that make me think of them and of their closeness. For me, it's lilac perfume and Sir Walter Raleigh tobacco, pipe tobacco. Hello Kitty backpacks and a snare drum. That was my grandmother's snare drum, by the way. And a short yellow tie and some tattered books. We all have our little gray stones. Cherish them. They're not just reminders of who they were. They're reminders of who they are. For this is All Saints' Day, the day we remember that Jesus called them, every one of them, out of their tombs, and now they are only a stone's throw away. Amen.